It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of, well, all of sports, basically. So, Steve, how you doing today in this crisp fall morning?
Oh, man. Well, yeah, it's fall is relative in Texas. For us, it's bitterly cold here right now. But it's super early, man. I mean, we had to do this for scheduling reasons, but I now know why singers don't like performing in the morning vocally because your throat's all messed up here. But I'm doing okay. I'm suffering through what Texas calls cold, which doesn't make me happy.
It's actually still pretty nice here as well.
I don't even own a winter jacket, because I've been down here in Texas so long, and so for me, it's like what used to be normal is now a shock to the system.
I'm on my mid-tier winter jacket right now. You go from windbreaker to sort of light middle, and then obviously when the howling ice winds start, you got your full parka action.
I think I should be okay in shorts later once we get through kind of to mid to late morning. Then we should be back to shorts weather. It should be fine.
I know. I hold out for shorts as long as I can, as all middle-aged chubby men understand. All right, Steve. Our last show, we kind of did the big sprawling story, connect the dots, private investigator style. This week we're back to our kind of, categorical. The world didn't give us any big juicy meatballs across our home plate, but we got a lot of good stories for you. One, that brings us no joy just because of the tragedy of it, but, has to be covered sort of in our Athletes Behaving Badly series, and that's, of course, what happened in Las Vegas this past week with the drunk driving accident by Henry Ruggs. Unfortunately, a young woman, I think like 22, 23 years old, was killed in this late night crash. I think she was rear-ended by a Ruggs, who I think it was reported by the Las Vegas police authorities was going something in the neighborhood of 156 miles an hour in his Corvette, I think down the Strip or, somewhere in and around the Strip. Which I know
the Strip itself, but yeah, somewhere down there.
Whatever that area is. And here we are. The Raiders have since released him. It's been a tough stretch for the Raiders, and I think, they just decided, which I was found a little bit surprising to be honest, but they just released him outright. And we go from here. I mean, this is just incredibly sad, and, not to be too cynical, also just incredibly stupid.
Yeah, and 156 miles an hour. I mean, nobody should have an ounce of sympathy for Henry Ruggs, because that's just grossly irresponsible. It's awful. He deserves everything that's coming to him. So he's been charged criminally with one count of DUI resulting in death and 2 counts of reckless driving. And then DUI, there's another DUI charge associated with it that's not resulting in death, because the girl who was with him, he had his girlfriend with him who was injured but not fatally so. So he's been charged with 2 counts of DUI, 2 counts of reckless driving. All 4 of those are felonies. So if you add all that up, he could be facing about more than 50 years in jail if he was sentenced concurrently. And just to show you here, so he was a first-round draft pick by the Raiders in 2020, meaning last year. So the Raiders cutting him, they had to swallow a bunch of dead money to get rid of him. But I think they really had no choice. This is not, I mean, we use the Athletes Behaving Badly thing in kind of a funny way, and because normally it's not this serious of a story, but this is clearly tragic. And so it's not funny. But I think the Raiders had no choice. I mean, you can't keep a guy on who did this. So yes, they've taken, a month ago they had a star coach, they had a promising young receiver, and all of that is just totally gone. But yes, the facts were 100. He was the airbag had him at 156 miles an hour and then 127 miles an hour when impact occurred. There's a video, if you're masochistic and want to watch it, of the immediate post-crash aftermath of the car burning and Ruggs sitting on the ground like sobbing for it. So it's awful, but I mean, to me, I hope he gets the max. I hope we never see him again. I think you have to make an example out of somebody who does this. And here's the thing, Chris. The NFL has all kinds of ways to make this, ensure this doesn't happen. NFL teams have a number you can call where somebody will come pick you up. The NFL itself has a program like that. The girlfriend herself could have driven. He blew a .16, which is twice the legal limit. So it's just a horrible situation.
Yeah, that's the second I saw the headline, come through my crawl or wherever information was being directly injected into my brain, I was like, well, here's another senseless tragedy, because it has, in the history of human beings walking the terra firma of planet Earth, has it been easier to not drive yourself, right? And we're not talking about the cornfields of Iowa here. We're talking about a 24-hour major metropolis which caters to late night people. So even, whether it's all the services the NFL provide, whether it's just acting responsibly and having a friend, a buddy, somebody on the payroll whose job it is to drive you around, the services like Uber and Lyft, and I'm sure whatever version of yellow taxis that exist in Las Vegas are, they're there. You probably can't walk half a block without being able to pick up a free ride without even using your cell phone. So, it's just insane to me that you would put this much risk into that level of stupidity when it's just this easy to avoid. I mean, it really is a textbook example of a senseless death and a senseless destroying of what, he was starting to show signs. He had his rookie deal. It's also, it is your job to protect, and I'm sure he has people relying on him to protect your tens of millions of dollars career, right? Like, if you can't, now I'm not saying don't party, I'm not saying don't be a wastoid. I'm not even going to make those judgments. Just get a frickin' driver. I mean, that's the ask.
Well, yeah, and it shouldn't go unnoticed that driving sober at 156 miles an hour.
It's also dangerous, yeah.
Is not just beyond, I mean, that's reckless. I'm not going to pretend to be a saint about it because I've driven fast too, but I've driven anywhere near remotely that fast, particularly not on a freeway, because this was not on a freeway. As Chris said, it's somewhere, I don't know Vegas that well, but it's somewhere down there, downtown-ish. And so even if he was completely sober, the idea that this man is driving 156 miles an hour he belongs in jail just for that alone. So it's awful. I mean, and we literally have cars that will literally drive themselves. I mean, if you buy the right car, granted, you'd still get a DUI, I think, most likely, but, if you were stopped, but the car literally drives itself. And so there's just no excuse. He's ruined his life. His NFL career is over, I think. And the reason is, it looks like, I'm not licensed in the state of Nevada, but from what I have read, the DUI resulting in death charge cannot result in a probation. So he's going to go to prison. I think there's very little debate that he's guilty of this. The odds of him being found guilty are extraordinarily high. So there's no debate there. So he's going to go to prison. Even if he gets 3 or 4 years, realistically, his NFL career is most likely over. You may see him in like the St. Louis Stampede or something someday, something like that. Whoever, I mean, I'm making that up, but whatever version of the XFL comes back or something like that in a few years. But realistically, he's ruined his entire life. His family was counting on him for money, whoever his family is. Somebody's dead. It's a case of multiple horrible choices by a man who had every opportunity to do something that was not the wrong thing. So if any of you, like Derek, if you saw David Carr came out and had some sympathetic words for him and basically supported his teammate, which I'm not going to fault David for that, I guess, but nobody should have one single ounce of sympathy at all for Henry Ruggs for this. Nobody.
Yeah, and this is Las Vegas, so Sin City, which means, if a municipality's business model is based on, the Sin City mystique, and it means they're going to have tough laws against stuff that they have to protect against, right? So, like, to maintain the business model that they have to have laws that have teeth, or else it would be a complete free-for-all. So on something like drunk driving, as Steve mentioned, they don't mess around. This is not, so they have strict laws in place. I think the best case scenario for Ruggs in terms of a prison sentence is probably what? A year and a half, 2 years. If everything breaks right for him, he'll sit in prison for 2 years.
At a minimum, and the judge, they quoted the judge saying, the judge had some harsh words for this, so it doesn't look good for him. Now, his bail was only $150,000, which surprised me a little bit. But it did come with home confinement, electronic monitoring, and whatnot, and that he surrendered his passport. So, remember, the point of bond is to make sure you show up, not to punish you because you're not found guilty yet. But still, $150,000 didn't seem like a ton of money. So the thing is, Nevada has very loose laws. Prostitution is legal in some circumstance, and we can debate that another day. But Chris is right. When it comes to things like this, they show no quarter, as no state should. And the reason is what you said, which is if you're going to have a state you're a city that's your party city, you got to protect the public, from it. So, this is the prosecutor. The prosecutor had really harsh words for it. That's not surprising. But I've done a few DUI cases, prosecution. I've never heard of one this bad. 156 miles an hour resulting in death. I'd be really surprised if he only got 2 years. Seriously. I just have to think that if he's found guilty, even if he plea bargains, it's got to be several years at least. It would be a travesty of justice if he didn't go to prison for a long time, in my view.
Yeah.
And by the way...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, in terms of the Raiders, the dead cap for the Raiders is $3 million, and so they're losing money by cutting him. So because the first round... contracts for first round picks are 100% guaranteed, and so it's a lot of dead money, and so they've lost money on their salary cap by getting rid of him, but they had to do it. But go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Well, I was also just going to mention that also high profile cases don't generally get the Las Vegas, the judge, etc., is not going to want to look like they're going soft on this guy after all this. So it actually brings you probably a little extra punishment.
Yeah, I think it's a common misconception amongst the public that celebrities and athletes get a break on these kind of cases. And I think it's true to say that they can afford the best attorneys, but prosecutors and judges tend to show them no quarter at all. For cases like this, for the exact reason you said, it's they don't want to be seen as going soft on celebrities, so they tend to treat celebrities a little bit harsher. Just look at, like this is a long time going back a long ways, but Paris Hilton went to jail for a DUI, and one DUI case, most people would have never set foot in jail for one DUI with no damage, no harm at all. But they sent her to jail. Why? I have no sympathy for Paris Hilton either. Don't misunderstand me, but celebrity, so the court had to do something. So I don't think if the judge is involved in sentencing and there's not a plea bargain, I think the judge probably will be very harsh on him. Because again, if you serve these sentences, if he's found guilty in all 4 charges and serve them concurrently, by my math off the top of my head, I think it's 52 years. He may go away for decades for this.
Yeah, no, this is not a good situation at all. A little aside, if you're tracking quality quarterbacks who may be on the move and who are used to being in less than stellar organizations, you just put Derek Carr on that list. He might be a little less picky.
Yeah. I mean, and Ruggs was having a pretty good year if you look.
Yeah.
I mean, last year he was only 26 receptions, 452 yards. He was already at 24 receptions for 469 yards this year. So he was on his way to becoming a solid pro before he wrecked multiple lives.
Yeah, for sure. So there we go on that. Oh, and here's the thing, thank you, Kadarius Toney, for providing the cautionary tale for what dumb players do with instant reactions on social media and completely tell on themselves and embarrass themselves.
I didn't see what he said.
Oh,
I'm not on social media anymore.
Like, he had some dumb tweet that was like, "Oh, we got it. People make mistakes. Just real. Like, we're all young. It's like, okay, dude. Like, have a little read the room. That all can be true in some philosophical way." And we're dealing with very real death here. And also, there's no need for you to say anything at all. So to say something dumb is just almost twice as bad.
And nobody asked for Kadarius Toney's opinion about it. And you're going to say that knowing that a woman literally burned alive.
Yeah, and it's within
in a burning car.
Within 24 hours, and you're tweeting, nonsense.
Because in case people don't understand this, the woman died in the burning car, not directly because of the immediate impact. She literally burned alive. And here we've got Kadarius Toney, mouthing off. It's just, just shut up, dude. Nobody cares about what you think.
I'm sure Joe Judge, a coach that's probably coaching his, on the fumes of his career with the New York Giants. The last thing he needs to worry about is, dealing with that at his Wednesday press conference. So
it just goes to show how dumb some of these NFL players are, and what an insulated, protected bubble they've lived in.
Yeah, like saying, right, like a Corvette at 156 miles an hour down a city block that probably, even in the middle of the night, average miles per hour on that is probably about 34. So we move from players behaving badly, we're equal opportunity, to owners behaving badly, and some. Here, Steve, why don't you set up how we'll probably watch another owner that's not named Daniel Snyder get taken out for bad behavior.
Yeah, I want to do this story because I know we have a lot of Washington fans that listen to this just because, we're a Washington-based podcast and whatnot. This is another example of another owner being an awful human being, allegedly. And he's denied a good bit, not all of it, but he's denied some of it. There's a really, really long-form piece on ESPN about this that is dated November 4th, which was last Thursday, by Baxter Holmes. It's really long, so get your popcorn ready. Called Allegations of Racism and Misogyny Within the Phoenix Suns, inside Robert Sarver, 17-year tenure as owner. And if you want the Cliff Notes version, CNBC has a shorter, more easier to read version by Annika Kim Constantino, if you want to read it. So basically, ESPN interviewed like 70 different people, currently with the Suns, not with the Suns anymore, and they have a whole bunch of instances of Sarver allegedly using the N-word, treating women horribly, making lewd comments, making really rude comments to players, to staffers. Staffers say this is an absolute nightmare to work for this organization. And Sarver himself has admitted to being difficult, but he's disclaimed ever using the N-word. He's disclaimed a lot of the more terrible allegations, sexual misconduct related allegations. And nobody's ever said he's raped anybody or anything like that. It's mostly him being a misogynistic pig, allegedly. I think this is, and again, Sarver denies most of this stuff. I think that the interesting part about this is not nearly the first time we've seen owners have this problem. Our own very own Daniel Snyder, they've never alleged he's using the N-word, but he's had, obviously, go back and listen to our last show if you want an hour on that. Donald Starling, Robert Kraft got caught with, a massage prostitute. Jim Irsay was busted for DUI. Driving under the influence of drugs, not alcohol, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And this is just another one. I think it shows the culture amongst the billionaire set. These aren't necessarily nice people with wonderful morals. I'm sure some of them are, but I think it takes a lot mentally to step on enough people to get to where you are and have so much ego that you think it's okay to make racist comments or allegedly make racist comments, to make, to be just a complete jerk to the people around you who he admits to. I wanted to do this story just to show people that this is not only Daniel Snyder. I think this is far more common amongst people like billionaire sports owners than somebody may realize, and that's what I want people to understand. And just to conclude here, the NFL, or the NBA rather, ran Donald Starling out for much less. Donald Starling was caught on, if you recall, a few years ago, caught on audio recording by a girlfriend, him making racist statements. Now, Starling had been a horrible human being for decades before that, and he was accused of more serious racism than what was caught on audio. So this is not unlike the Starling case. It may be worse, and certainly in terms of the way he acted. So don't think it's just Daniel Snyder, people. Thoughts, Chris?
Well, I think the main difference as we sit here and look at this story right now compared to Donald Sterling and even and Snyder for that matter is that there's no audio or videotape of this, right? So, I mean, I'm not gonna, ESPN, they do quality, long form journalism, yada yada. So, I'm not undercutting the validity of their investigation, and it looks pretty extensive. But we all know that when there's something on, tape, so to speak, things move faster. So I think that's a key difference between these two NBA owners. Now, the end result could very well be the same. The NBA seems to have better appetite to bounce an owner than the NFL. You're talking about far less money. You're talking about, he's a relatively new owner. I mean, relative. I think what he bought the Suns.
He's there for 17 years ago. I mean,
yeah.
He's been there a while.
Yeah, but he's not like he's not some stalwart of the league. And it's much more, the ownership of NBA is a little bit more transient than the NFL and so on and so forth. So, we'll see. I think, I think chances are that he gets bounced for this, especially if there's some corroborating evidence or something that is sort of undeniable. I think I think the odds are pretty good that he does not own the Phoenix Suns on the other side of this, and we'll see. I find it fascinating that in the reporting, it's always so interesting. You can hide bad behavior if your general behavior is okay. But this is a guy who was constantly in the basketball operations, was just like a jerk around. This is a bad boss, bad guy, and berating coaches, thinking he knows how to run a better pick and roll, et cetera, et cetera. So, when you're an a-hole in all aspects of your life, and then you have deeper versions of that a-hole, it's a lot harder to escape these things, right? Like, and it looks like his behavior just, put the racism, misogyny, just sort of general bad behavior, bad boss behavior, was off the hook already. And so it's much easier, and you have a much bigger surface area for people want to take you out. And that sounds, when ESPN's, what you said, interviewing 60, 70 people, that means a lot of people who, saw you behave badly at a sort of regular level, are ready to talk when there's something deeper.
Yeah, there's more in this story. It's really long. I highly recommend you guys read it. Just set aside some time to do it. But it's not just racist and misogynistic comments. Like Chris said, there's, allegations of him coming into the coaching room and trying to draw plays up and not knowing what the hell he's talking about, because he doesn't know any more about basketball than you and I do. He's a regular guy. And, players basically rolling their eyes at it, and some of them getting mad and not listening to him. There's a lot of the bad boss stuff, him just screaming, like the main, one of the earliest allegations against Daniel Snyder was that he delivered a tub of vanilla ice cream to Greg Williams.
No, there's Mike Nolan.
Mike Nolan. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, sorry, it was Mike Nolan. But there's not a specific ice cream allegation, but there's a lot of that type of nonsense in this story. So he's just a bad boss. If this story is to be believed, just bad boss. But bad human being, anybody want to be around. But as you said earlier, the key difference here is that none of this is on audio that at least has come forward yet, or on video. What got Donald Sterling bounced? The girlfriend recorded him. Now, everybody who'd been paying attention knew that Donald Sterling was a terrible person, going back decades. It even goes back to, like him owning, being a slumlord, and I think that it was in L.A. and getting sued for racist, practices. He had all kinds of particularly racist stuff where he'd refer to some of his African-American players as awful things, and the NBA just tolerated all of it, and it wasn't until it came out on audio that he was gone. And so, yeah, I'd like to think that if this is true, they would bounce Sarver, but I don't know, man. I mean, I think you make a very good point about the audio. This is just a story. If he survives the couple week long cycle here, maybe he survives. The NBA says it's investigating. That part of the story was the NBA's response to the story, rather, was that they are investigating. Now, we all saw what the NFL did with Washington's investigation, which was bury it as soon as they possibly could, get it done, throw some dirt on it, and, move on. And the NBA might do that, too, because, again, they investigated Sterling, Donald Sterling. So I'm not convinced that he's going to get bounced for this, Chris. I kind of think he might survive unless something more comes out.
Oh, I'd say it's a kind of a coin flippy type of situation right now.
It's one of those things that they're going to have to it's one of those things that have to go to him and say, "Look, man, you got to sell, or we're going to make your life miserable." Because the process in these sports leagues of the constitutions for forcing owners to sell is a lot more difficult. So, like Sterling, they just went to him and said, "You're toast. You got to go," and he left. That's same with Jerry Richardson with the Carolina Panthers. They just went to him and said, "You got to leave." So it's probably going to be more along those lines if he leaves than them taking some kind of formal vote to force him to sell. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. And, there's a few things. One, I love this ESPN quote from 2018, sort of to set up what kind of owner he was in general. It said ESPN in a story, not relating to all this, but really relating to the Suns, that Sarver has earned a long-standing reputation for aggressively involving himself in basketball decisions. Not just like medals, not, has a say, is, aggressively involving himself in basketball operations.
Yeah, we weren't kidding. He's literally drawing plays up on a chalkboard, and his players are going, "What the hell are you talking about? This is stupid." And, he tried to draw up a pick and roll in the paint, and I'm no X's and O's expert, but the players quoted in the story are rolling their eyes at him, basically about what he was trying to do. And if you want the most disgusting detail out of this, because I'm always about discussing details, apparently he passed around. Here's the example of the type of guy this is. This is ESPN's story. Sarver allegedly, this is a quote, Sarver allegedly passed around a photo of his wife in a bikini to employees and discussed times when she performed oral sex on him. Now, we've been around guys like this, right? Yeah. But I have at least. This is a billionaire owner of a sports team, though. And his story, his side of it was that some company had come to him and said, "We'll make bikinis and we'll put the Phoenix Suns logo on them." And that they sent some to him. He put his wife on them. It took a photo to show what they looked like. and that's what he was doing, passing around. But this is the example, the type of stuff. That's his side of the story. I don't really believe it personally, because I've been around too many guys like this. But that's a example of a type of behavior that he allegedly displayed.
Yeah, who doesn't put pictures of their scantily clad wife into their business slide decks? I mean, come on.
And then talk about their personal life, to a bunch of employees. That's, awful. I'm sure she was thrilled,
Oh my gosh, it just is so ridiculous. And I think this is what we all have to watch on the story. What kind of hard evidence emerges? Because audio, video, but also text, right? Like, was anyone be surprised that Bruce Allen and John Gruden would use coarse language in a hotel bar in Indianapolis at the Combine? No, okay? If you were at 1 a.m. at the hotel bar there, you could probably assume you get some, some language that would not be, acceptable in polite society. But it was the emails that sunk it, right? It's right there in print. It's that kind of evidence. And I think, especially when you're talking about this kind of money, especially you're talking about this kind of power, and especially when you're talking about owners who open up the opportunity for themselves to be revealed, it takes that kind of hard evidence. It takes a 156 miles an hour, drunk driving type of evidence to sink these things. So I think, you can come up with all the long form investigation you want of reports of him behaving this way. But, I think if you're watching the story, look to see if something, that's there, in print, in recording, something that is that smoking gun.
Yeah, because, newsflash, Robert Sarver is not the only a-hole in the NBA. I'd be willing to bet an amount of money that matters to me, which is a lot less than what matters to an NBA owner, that others act the same exact way. And they don't particularly want that to come out either. So that's why I said I'm not convinced he's gonna get bounced because of this. There may be an investigation, and then he will have a response to something to the effect of, the Phoenix Suns are committed to ensuring a fair and, equitable, working relationship for all, and we're going to do our best to clean this up. And to the extent I've been a contributor to that, I'm going to focus on my own behavior, and we're committed to doing the right thing going forward. He says something like that, and the NBA goes, okay. But if somebody, happen to turn their iPhone recorder on and record him saying some of this stuff, that's another story. Because again, the American public has a short attention span. And you read this and you listen to our show, talk about it for 20 minutes, and then you move on. But if you hear the recording of him saying this, that just is a different matter. Ask Ray Rice. If a story had come out about Ray Rice and said Ray Rice hit his girlfriend, I don't know if anybody would have cared. You would have cared for 5 minutes. Look at Tariq Hill. Tariq Hill had this happen. There was even a recording of it, but there wasn't a video. And the girlfriend, because there's a lot of money involved, through her statements, and nobody cares about what Tariq Hill did. Tariq Hill's a terrible person, okay? Horrible human being. But it wasn't on video, so he's escaped. So, yeah, I think if somebody recorded Sarver surreptitiously, that's another matter. But I tend to think he's going to make some statement like I just said, and it'll probably be fine.
And I think you said this in it earlier, but I'll sort of highlight it, that, what might happen is they may use their soft power, right? They might say, hey, you bought the team for $400 million in 2004, valuations have skyrocketed, we'll make sure you get a good deal, you're going to, quadruple your initial investment, so to speak. They also just might turn up the behind the scenes pressure and, say, hey, this seems to be a good time to sell. That might be the most realistic case in which he doesn't own the Phoenix Suns 2-3 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he'd have to be convicted of a crime, of a serious crime, to get voted out. And I don't even know what the NBA Constitution says about this. Presumably there's some way for them to do it. But even a miserable old bag like Marge Schott with the Cincinnati Reds, they didn't formally vote her out. What they did to her, and for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, this goes back to early 80s. And Marge Schott was another one who said all kinds of horrible things and, made like slavery references. And she was just a miserable, miserable person. And what baseball did was they got tired of her eventually. And then they removed her from governance, but they didn't literally force her to sell, at least not for a long time. And that was, for what she said, was far worse than what Sarver's been caught with. So, yeah, I think if at most they may have somebody go, not James Dolan. He's just bad. So I was some prominent NBA owner, Mark Cuban or somebody, go to him and say, it's over, dude. You need to go. That's about the most I think that would happen to him, absent some woman, getting him charged with a felony. Felony like sexual assault or something, which is not alleged in the story.
So there we go. So there's our, all kinds of people behaving badly. We'll move on.
We had to get the bad out of the way.
Yeah. Some good news, or some, tempered good news. As a, trend we've seen over the last really probably 6 to 8 months is that sports on TV is rebounding in terms of an audience, after sort of cratering during, the COVID year or whatever you want to call it. But we do seem to see ratings rebounding across the board, and that includes the World Series, which I think on that final clinching game, which wasn't a very good game, there was something like 14 million and change viewers, and they averaged about 11 million viewers, which was up from 8 or 9 million viewers the year before. So, I mean, this, yay baseball, good for them. I think we're seeing a lot of this across all TV sports properties, so I don't think I am surprised. I mean, I don't want to be the wet blanket, but those still aren't great numbers for baseball kind of long term. I believe... this is, you don't even really need to say this, but when it went head to head, I think on a Monday night football game, maybe it was Thursday night, I can't remember, but with a one time,
slaughtered.
Yeah, you got destroyed. Yeah, so so some random first half of the year NFL primetime game, just runs roughshod over a World Series game. That's still kind of a big problem, although I think baseball is sort of resigned to it, but they got to bounce. Is it a dead cat bounce in their ratings, or does this, probably just show you what happened through the Kentucky Derby, through golf tournaments, through other team sports? We're seeing a return of the TV audience.
Well, I think the Kentucky Derby last year, which absolutely just tanked horribly, faced a lot of uphill circumstance. They moved it to the fall. It was competing. It was on a, it was competing against college football, and basketball and a bunch of other things. So I think the Kentucky Derby suffered a particularly egregious fall, but a lot of it was more circumstantial than anything. The story, first of all, where we got this was CNBC. Jabari Young published November 3rd, 14.3 million people watched the Atlanta Braves win the 2021 World Series. And for context's sake, it's cited in the article here, but last year's Game 6 between my beloved Los Angeles Dodgers and then the Tampa Bay Rays drew 12.6 million viewers. That was the clinching Game 6. And this year it was 14.3. So that's, 1.7 million, increase. And then the average of 11.75 million was substantially over last year's. Obviously, generally speaking, certainly since the strike in the mid-90s, the baseball ratings have kind of tanked for a variety of reasons. Some of it's not their fault. Some of it's just, it's funny, like Bruce Springsteen did a song, and I want to say 91, 92 maybe, called 57 Channels and Nothing's On. Remember this song?
Totally.
Well, and now 57 Channels is like, that's not even the lowest tier of cable, you could get. And so the world has changed drastically in terms of broadcast. So I think last year was a strange year for sports viewing on TV because, the Dodgers, it's not just me prattling on about my team. The Dodgers are a major national draw. But just with the COVID age and the way the baseball season went, I think it just didn't interest people as much. This year, the world has gotten back to normal a lot more because this wasn't a great draw, by the way. The Astros and the Braves, that's not anything that baseball wants to write home about. The Braves, a little bit more bigger draw than the Astros. But the Astros, for being in a large market, are not a big draw. And then you throw in the cheating scandal, that nobody outside of the city of Houston's rooting for them, basically. So I think it was a tough matchup. They certainly would have rather had the Dodgers in there over the Braves in terms of ratings and whatnot. So I think it's a good sign that the ratings are up. They're never going to get back to what it was. That's just not the way the world is now. But the money worked out fairly well for them in terms of ad trends and money spent on ads and whatnot. So I think it's a good sign for sports. Baseball just needs to accept that they're never going to come close to the NFL, because I think that NFL game might have been the Buccaneers. I can't remember, but it was a good matchup. But yeah, the fact that they got just annihilated by a regular NFL game shouldn't have surprised anybody.
No, I would have assumed that was going to happen. So it was a zero surprise. Buried in this article is a kind of I think it's when they start talking about the ad revenue and that doing pretty well with the sales. But EDO is basically a company people pay to search what happens after an ad's run in a big spot to see what the online activity is, the conversation. And so if you want to see what people were caring about while they watched baseball and hitting the Google machine, Walmart, TikTok, and the upcoming movie House of Gucci, which I've
never heard of.
It's you'll hear of it soon enough. It's about the Gucci family, but it's got Al Pacino, it's got Lady Gaga, it's got a bunch of other. It's got four
high
big
profile
stars. Jared Leto in another one of his body transformation. I was looking at the movie poster just last night, and I could not find Jared Leto behind the pounds of prosthetics and makeup that he was wearing for this role. So there, that's what people seem to be caring about. So that I can just imagine some 50-year-old, and this is self-aware on my part, 50-year-old baseball fan watching watching a TikTok ad, and then you're like, what is this? Maybe I'll finally check out this TikTok.
And watching a bunch of 20-somethings dance.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, EDO is one of these companies that, intrudes on your life as much as possible, I think, and it's sort of the dirty side of internet research to a certain extent, I think. But yeah, the EDO advertised, according to the article, that advertisers spent more than $156 million on advertisements during this World Series. So it's a pretty good look. It's a good sign for baseball. They could have what is certainly, I think, deemed to be a mediocre matchup in terms of draw. It's not the Yankees and the Dodgers or the Red Sox and the Cubs or somebody, and that they had pretty good ratings. So baseball ought to be pretty happy, I think, about their future.
There you go.
Within context.
Yeah, right. In their lane. If they need to understand their lane and do well in it. That's where baseball is at.
Yeah, they just need to accept that, the NFL seems to be Teflon. You have Henry Ruggs out there, killing people, and it's not going to affect ratings a single bit, even for the Raiders.
If you look at the last month of NFL headlines that are not football related, it's been brutal. It's been hit after hit, and it does not matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Half of them been with Washington, involving Washington. But all these things that have happened, the racist emails, the DEA raids, allegations of sexual misconduct. Now we have Henry Ruggs kill somebody. None of it matters. The public does not care at all in terms of, I think the public cares that a woman died, but it's not going to matter at all in terms of who's watching on Sunday. It will matter zero, not one thing.
No, it will not. All right, so we're going to end up here with kind of a fun story, but also sort of an interesting one. If anyone spent more than 5 minutes thinking about sports athletic cards, especially baseball cards, at some point in their youth, knows the company Topps fairly well. But if you are one of those people that's going to show up at the sports memorabilia store next spring looking to get your 2022 baseball cards early pack, you're not going to be buying them from Topps, apparently, Steve?
Yeah. So this is The Athletic. What's next for Topps? After losing its baseball card licenses, the iconic brand faces a crossroads by Bill Shea, dated Friday, October 29th. Yeah, Topps has had the contract to do baseball cards with MLB for 70 years. And baseball just pretty ruthlessly replaced them with Fanatics, the company Fanatics, without telling them at all. They didn't have any there was no competitive bidding situation. There was no, put both of them in separate rooms and go back and forth and who can give us a better deal. Baseball came to Topps and said, "You're out. We've signed a deal with Fanatics. Thanks for your service. Later, dude." And then Topps is all of a sudden out. What I did know, and I was not a big baseball collector, but I think we all had a card or two at least, here and there probably. And certainly Topps was the biggest one. What I didn't know is that Topps has all kinds of other businesses. Did you guys know this? I didn't. They have candy, just a bazooka bubblegum, ring pops. They've got a digital services unit that does gift cards for major brands. That's a quote from the story. And so now, and they've also got, they've also licensed Star Wars, UEFA Champions League. That's soccer for those of you who don't know. And they've got Formula One and a bunch of other things. So it's not just baseball, but baseball was a huge part of their business. And for it to just turn around and leave, I mean, a good chunk of this article is talking about what Topps going to now have to do to move on and continue to survive as a company after losing, a big chunk of their business. So we'll see what happens to them, but in the future, it's going to be Fanatics. Now, one thing, and the thing is they have the infrastructure for this. One thing that is proposed in the article is that Fanatics may just buy Topps, outright, and then Topps will exist not as a name, but as a branch of the Fanatics business, and they just continue to run the baseball card operation, only it'll have the name Fanatics on it. That was an interesting take on it, because that's sort of implying that Fanatics doesn't really have the infrastructure for this. It's what you kind of get out of it. I think if you say, well, they need to buy Topps to continue the baseball operation, yet they have the contract. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, and they also don't have the brand capital, right? It's not 70 years of people associating a brand with a product. That if that goes a long way. Most people, even people that collect cards, don't necessarily care about what corporate entity owns a thing, right? And but that doesn't mean they still would want to have goodwill towards a Topps name and a brand is associated with their cards. And seeing Fanatics on the top of the packaging or whatever, it would, if they can afford it, it probably behooves Fanatics to just sort of sort of subsume and move on.
Yeah, it's not on the realm of possible that Fanatics buys Topps, keeps the name on the cards. Yeah, it changes nothing. Like you said, nobody will ever know or care that Fanatics now owns Topps, so that's entirely possible. I think that's probably more likely than Topps just disappearing from the business entirely. Because, like you said, I think the people who care about in our serious baseball card collectors, Topps is kind of the number one. There's one or two others that do it, but Topps is the big name and it's the high value name. So if Fanatics can pull it off, it would probably behoove them to keep the Topps name alive, at least as a branding mark.
It's always fascinating when you see these kinds of articles that you get a little bit of look in, and So, in 2020, this is not from a public filing, through taxes because they're a private company, but an article from the New York Post, not always the most legitimate source, but I think here we could have a relative trust in it, that they were worth in 2020 $567 million. So that's if you just want to think about valuation, basically within the last couple of years, that's about what they're worth, all told. And they really if they can survive this, they do. I mean, the Star Wars licensing deal is actually huge. And also remember that's Disney. They do have a lot of properties that they still continue to print cards on. The other thing that I find fascinating, if you kind of just dig into this Athletic article, these kind of subcultures and these like sort of mini economies and markets that sort of pop up around these type of things. But one of the experts that they go to in the commentary about this is Suze. I'm going to get this wrong, but Lou Gijaraj, who is a longtime collector and valuation expert who's worked for Topps and others. So if you do a quick Google search on Suze Lulu Gajarj or whatever, and she's just an interesting character who's somehow made an entire niche career around valuating cards and has all kinds of online internet shows about hobbies and collecting. So anytime you go this deep into these kind of subcultures, you find these interesting people who, God love her, have been able to make a long-time career out of card collecting.
It's amazing to me how much money is in cards. It really is. I'd like to know, the article didn't go into it, but I'd like to know how baseball just decided to ruthlessly drop Topps and why. And clearly the answer is Fanatics offered them more money. That's got to be the answer. But to not even give Topps the opportunity to bid against it or anything, just said, okay, you're out. Pretty ruthless and pretty brutal, I think. And if you didn't mention it, Chris, the other company involved in this is Upper Deck. So that's the main competition for Topps. But anyway, it's a fun story. We'll see what happens. If I had to make a guess right now, I'd say the odds are probably best that Fanatics buys Topps and keeps the name alive. That's going to be my official prediction on this.
Yeah, I have no good alternative. That seems to make the most sense. Or, Fanatics says, whatever, we got this covered, and, Topps just figures out a way to make that portfolio work in other ways.
They become the bubblegum king.
Yeah. they had some good properties, so they're not, they were not a one-stop shop, but obviously,
this is the main one.
Yeah, in the card market, which is robust, baseball is sort of still king, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens. Keep an eye on it. There's our fun story for the day. I guess it's not fun if you're the owners of Topps, perhaps, but in light of the other things we had to talk about, this was the fun story.
Yeah, for sure. So go check out Suze if you want more details about the world of collectible cards here. So she's named as a big-time expert here. This is kind of interesting. Though they start, like every other article that has anything to do with business, NFTs are mentioned. So there you go. So Steve, we're sitting here, at least as we record it, and by the time this gets released in the sort of bye-week window, but you all are not taking a break at the Hogsty.
Well, we took a break from the Wednesday game preview, or the Thursday morning game preview show last week. We did skip that. We normally skip that for the bye week, but we have the bye week spectacular episode, which will be released, which by the time you hear this will already have been released, and then we'll be back into the regular game preview, game recap grind for the rest of the season. Seasons of Discontent, which is Rick Snyder's look at all things Washington sports and life, is doing two 15-minute shows a week. He's also got on YouTube. He's got I think it's Rick Snyder is the YouTube hit, so check that out. And we've got all of our regular written content.
Perfectly described, probably as a grind.
Believe me, when you're covering this team, this is season 6, I believe. By the time we get to this part of the year, this is when it becomes a grind. It's because there's nothing to root for. The team isn't going anywhere, and we have to do it. So, we do our thing, but it becomes exponentially more difficult toward the end of the year.
Probably the most interesting game for Washington football team fans over the next, it's going to happen this weekend, but probably the most interesting game over the next 7 or 8 weeks is the Ole Miss Liberty game, if you want to scout quarterbacks that might be available.
Yeah, I haven't gotten too into the quarterbacks yet, but the kid from Liberty, whose name is escaping me right now, is one of the top
And
prospects.
so is the Ole Miss guy. So
Yeah,
if you want a sneak peek, this will be retroactive. But watch some highlights from Ole Miss and Liberty if you want to start scouting here in week 8 or 9.
Yeah, I don't know how likely it is that Ron Rivera drafts quarterback, but that's another topic for another show.
So there you go. We will see you in 2 weeks.